Sure. Yeah, we could move this as well. Okay, so so architecture is very important for natural products. You know that basically natural products have beautiful structures, all right? And sometimes they have really gorgeous architectures. However, there's another aspect of architecture. It's very important for the philosophy behind architecture. So there's a very famous Chicago architect. His name was Louis Sullivan. And he was famous because in I think it was 1893, if I remember correctly. I wasn't there, but and in 1893 there was what was called a World's Fair. That didn't really happen anymore. I mean, they used to call them expos. Eventually they called them expos. But a World's Fair in Chicago. And it was the time when Chicago was basically redesigned and made into really an amazing and beautiful city. And it was redesigned in part by a series of architects. But one of the most famous in terms of buildings was someone called Louis Sullivan, who designed some of the very early skyscrapers in the world. That's a whole other story. But one of his statements with respect to building a building was that form forever follows function. Right? So we need to think about that in terms of natural products. Okay? And I know that sounds weird, it sounds like a stretch, and maybe it is for some of you. However, it's basically this. If you think about a building, and you think about a sports arena versus a hotel, right? They're completely different buildings. But the first thing when you think about that building is, what's it for? What's its purpose? What's its function? It's going to function as a sports arena. All right? Is it inside? Is it outside? You know, is it for basketball or is it for soccer? And then once you've decided, once you've made that decision, and you say, well, okay, this is what it's for. Okay, it's for basketball. No, this is a hotel. It's going to have accommodations for 300 people. Then you begin to get into the details, and you say, well, okay, what's it going to look like? How many floors is it going to have? How much space is it going to occupy? You know, does it need a grand ballroom? You know, on and on. What restaurants does it need? Blah blah blah. If it's a sports arena, well, you know, how many seats does it need? Does it need 10,000? Does it need 50,000? Blah 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 blah. So one of the things that we have to do here is to decide what our function is. What's our role in society? And the title of the lecture I gave the other day began with "Natural Products Matter." Natural products matter, and people kind of forget that. So one of the questions we have, having introduced this term, ecopharmacognosy, is what's the function of it? If we're going to say, you know, it's about sustainable, biologically active natural products, what does that mean? What are we going to do with those biologically active natural products? Where do they fit in society? So one of the functions is to examine, delineate, and articulate the niche of natural products in both traditional medicine and in healthcare. Actually, it goes beyond that, because it goes into essential oils, and it goes into all kinds of other things. And then, given that it's eco, then you have to say, well, how's it going to make that sustainable? Right? How are you going to make it sustainable? So one of the things that has to happen is that ecopharmacognosy, whatever that is, has got to contribute to healthcare maintenance and to food and nutritional science. Okay? Because we do have this notion that's burgeoning of functional foods. Right? So the functional part of that is a biologically active natural product. Right? natural product. So in terms of going back to the pharmacy and the pharmacognosy situation again that we were just talking about, that's where the functional foods fit in, because that's a biologically active natural product. Okay? The important thing is, as always, however, is stay relevant. Right? Stay relevant. In other words, be doing things that are directly related to the needs of the society. We also need to create a sustainable vision for intellectual property, because there are very important issues there. We're going to talk about this in another time, particularly in terms of when it comes to drug discovery. We'll talk about intellectual property issues, because information systems. Why is that important? Why are information systems important? Speak up, please. Can't hear you. Sorry? Database. Who cares about a database? Why is that important? Okay. All right. So we need to understand something very, very fundamental here. You can't do anything without knowing what it is you're going to do. And in order to know what it is you're going to do in research, you have to have the information. And you have to know that information. And you have to have interpreted that information. And you have to have created a niche for yourself in order to decide what it is you're going to work on. So that requires information systems, right? Both in terms of literature information systems, right? That's one aspect. But in terms of your own research, how do you record your data? How do you store your data? How do you communicate your data from one person to another between database systems? So the whole notion of information systems, and it'll get us into a deeper area of artificial intelligence, of course, very soon. This whole area of information systems is absolutely critical now, both in terms of deciding what to do, and then having decided what to do, how to accumulate all the information that you need in order to both conduct your research and analyze your research and present your research. Okay? So information systems are a very, very critical aspect, and kind of an underestimated aspect. We'll see more about that later on. Sustainable vision for the botany. And again, that becomes a technology issue. All right? It's not just about a herbarium specimen. Right? It's about DNA barcoding. It's about the databases that are involved with the DNA barcodes of medicinal plants. It's about accumulating that information on a local and on a national basis. Various aspects of chemistry, biology, and technology. And when I say technology here, what I'm implying is that what you see as technology today that impinges on the research that you're doing now is going to change. It's going to change in the next 5 years. It's going to change in the next 10 years. And one of the challenges that we have, and one of the opportunities that's out there, of course, is what is the technology that can be used to assist us with our natural product research that perhaps is not being well used at the moment. And I'll mention one little word: drone. Drone. Everybody knows what a drone is, right? Okay. So think about how you might use that in natural product research. I'm trying to get you to think out of the box. Okay? Another aspect of the eco-vision for ecopharmacognosy concerns laboratory practices. I'll give you a very simple example. If you're extracting a plant, do you need to heat that solvent? That's energy. Are you wasting that energy by heating that plant extract? For 24 hours or 48 hours in order to get the material out of the plant? Do you need to do that? Have you demonstrated that you need to do that? What's the science behind that? That's just one example. We're going to see more later on. So the challenges for a country, particularly a country like yours, is balance. How do you balance the importation of allopathic drugs, these, prescription products that have been costing a fortune, versus developing your own pharmaceutical industry? And just to point out that there are only 11 countries in the world, I think now, it might be 12, but I think it's around 11 countries in the world which actually can do drug development. In other words, can actually take a drug from the bench through to a finished clinically demonstrated, effective, marketed product. Most of what's done is either generic substitution, making products that are already well known and well established, and producing them locally. Very, very few countries can, because they can't afford to. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the major pharmaceutical companies that can put up that $1.8 billion. So generic substitution, that's another major issue for a country. And if you're going to do generic substitution, where do those drugs come from? Do they come locally from a generic house? Or do they come from a country that produces a lot of generic drugs, like India? Okay? Or providing safe and effective traditional medicines. What does that mean? What's a safe and effective traditional medicine? But doing everything in a sustainable manner, because unless you're doing it in a sustainable manner, you don't have a long-term healthcare system. Okay? Where are you going to be 20 years from now with respect to medicines? And there's a term for that, and we'll talk about that. And you have to do this in an affordable manner. All right? Because if it's not affordable, then you're denying patients access. All right? And that's one of the big things, that's one of the big discussions that's going on in the United States at the moment with respect to what's called Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. All right? It's not called the Affordable Care Act by chance. It's deliberate. The idea is that you're making products available because they're affordable. That's a fundamental aspect of healthcare. So one of the things we have to think about in terms of developing traditional medicines, for example, is that they stay affordable. So where will nations get healthcare if drugs from the north are not available or are too costly? Well, traditional medicines are a fundamental aspect of basic healthcare needs. We know all about that, right? However, what's missing is the evidence. All right, and we're going to talk about aspects of that. The evidence for their safety and their efficacy is lacking, and that most of those products are completely unregulated. Adulteration, we haven't talked about this yet. Adulteration of traditional medicines is horrible. It is horrible. It's true for dietary supplements, it's true for phytotherapeuticals, and it's true for traditional medicines in various ways. As a result, that becomes a serious global health hazard. And lots to talk about. Resource depletion threatens continuing access to healthcare for millions of people. So what does the patient / consumer expect from a natural product? You're all patients. We're all patients. We're all taking natural products in various forms all the time. You're taking probably, well, I don't take very many either, but you're probably taking less than I am. What do you expect? So this is where I made that point earlier about coming at this from a patient perspective, right? Not from a basic scientist perspective. What's our expectations here? So what we should be assured is of the availability of quality, safe, effective, and consistent natural products. Let's see what I got in my little magic bag here. Maybe I've got something that's relevant. Yes, here we go. What's this? Ah, see? Why is it relevant? Why is it relevant to what we're talking about right now?
The legal.
Say again?
The legal is known. The name.
Yeah, the name.
It's
Okay.
known.
Okay.
And delicious.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, no, wait a minute. No, so that's not necessarily true of traditional medicine because most traditional medicines taste terrible. Right. Okay. So forget that idea. All right. No, but what?
It has natural, the obvious component.
Okay. All right. So yeah, it's still a bit, okay. So it's from a natural source. Sugar and chocolate. Quality. All right. Quality. And what else? Say again. Consistent. Right. So if I'm traveling all over the world, okay, I can go and buy my M&Ms, right, all over the world. And they're consistent. They taste the same. We're never going to be at that position without a tremendous amount of effort with respect to a traditional medicine. All right? We're not going to be at that place. It takes an intention. All right? That company has the intention that they are globalizing M&Ms to taste the same, to be effective. That's a biological response. Taste, a biological response. They taste the same wherever you buy them in the world. They're not manufactured in the same place, all right, and then distributed. They're manufactured all over the world, in many different countries. All right? I'll show you another example. There's one other global example that can you think of? Okay? Another global example where the product tastes the same all over the world. It's sold in all but one country in the world. No. Even more than McDonald's. Coca-Cola, exactly right. Okay? Quality and consistency. So how come something like that has a higher level of quality control, safety, efficacy and consistency than something that we need for our health? That we need for basic human health. Sorry, let me go back. So it's this consistency. Right? You'll see a lot of discussion in the literature about quality, safety, and efficacy. A few years ago, when I was giving another cartoon, I'll show you the cartoon in a few minutes. I was giving another cartoon. And I was on a plane somewhere, or at an airport or something, thinking, it's the consistency part that we're missing here. And that's when I came up with this QSET notion. All right. Traceability, sustainability of essential oils and medicinal plants. So we know that the plants are being depleted rapidly from various natural habitats. Marketed essential, and this also applies to essential oils, not just medicinal plants. So in other words, some of the essential oil plants are also wild harvested and not cropped and are disappearing. a major issue here, of course, is the sourcing. Where does that plant material come from? And what are the implications of having the same plant from a different location? It might be a different country. It might be a different location within a country. What we do know, of course, is those chemical profiles are going to be completely different. What are the implications if the chemical profile is different? What's the implication? The biology is different. If the biology is different, you're going to have a different biological/clinical outcome. So then you have to come back to the question, a very fundamental question in traditional medicine, which very few people talk about. What's the dose? What's the dose? And how do you establish that? What's the quality that's associated with establishing what the dose of a traditional medicine is? And all of that, of course, relates to sustainability because it says how much plant material you need in order to create a dose. Right? So if you need more plant material to create an effective dose, that means you've got to get that plant material from somewhere. So you begin to see now how this notion of sustainability in ecopharmacology begins to tie together with the patient. That what is going to be effective for the patient. Product development, another aspect of sustainability. We're going to talk later on about Taxol and the development of Taxol. Taxol is a drug, was originally a drug from the bark of a plant, from the yew tree, right? Is that a sustainable resource? In order to do the clinical trial on Taxol, I'll give you a heads up here, what that was needed was to cut down 36,000 yew trees in order to do one clinical trial, not to make it into a drug, but just to do a clinical trial. So what happened was the ecologically minded people said, no way, you're going to cut down 36,000 trees for that purpose. So Taxol was delayed in terms of drug development because it couldn't be sourced. It couldn't be sourced. So what that led to was innovation in terms of how it's now being produced, but that's another story. But the point being, think about that up front. So rather than working on the roots and the leaf and the bark, which are typically non-sustainable sources unless you've got rapidly growing plants, all right? I mean, it's okay to work on the roots if it's an annual plant, right? But if it takes 60 years to grow a tree and you're looking for the roots, that's not a sustainable resource. No, I'm serious. In other words, what I'm saying is that this notion of sustainability, has to come in at a very, very early stage in terms of what it is you're going to work on. Extraction processes. What are the extraction processes? Again, we talked about heating for forever. You know, we're going to heat for 2 or 3 days. No, I don't think so. That's a waste of energy. Sample purification steps. Do you just use endless amounts of silica gel? Is that recyclable? No, that's again, not thinking. We're not thinking in a sustainable manner. So how do you make these processes more green? Those of you who are chemists maybe have had some experience with green chemistry, so-called green chemistry. Right? So this, in a way, is the natural product aspect of green chemistry, of how you reduce energy requirements and how you recycle. You know, can you recycle your silica gel? You know, if not, is there another chromatographic medium that you can use that is recyclable? So it gets to the issue of how green is your lab. So, for example, think in terms of more efficient extraction procedures that use different energy systems, recyclable solvents and chromatographic supplies, renewable natural materials. Use the leaves, the fruits, versus using bark and roots for stuff. Avoid unnecessary steps. You know, a lot of people will jump straight to chromatography. Even when I was doing my Ph.D., even when I was doing that, the first steps in the procedures that I were using at that time were not chromatographic. They were partition steps. Those of you who've ever looked at how, well, let me back up a minute. How many of you know about the Vinca alkaloids? Vinblastine, vincristine, oncovin, velban, from Catharanthus roseus, all right? Everywhere it's there. So though the person who developed the manufacturing process for that developed a way to do extensive purification using solvents, all right, that were recyclable. Now this goes back over 50 years, but using processes that did not require chromatography until the later steps of purification. So as we think, you don't just take an extract and throw it on a column. No. You think. You do some partitioning. Solvents, acid, base, blah, blah, blah. Recyclable resins. You know, use your brain. What are you targeting here? What do you know about the properties of the system that you can use without wasting, I would say, I use that generously, wasting a lot of chromatographic silica gel. Let's get back to traditional medicines, and we'll go into a little bit of Alice here. So Alice says, well, because she comes across the bottle of this labeled poison, better read it first, because if one drinks too much from a bottle marked poison, it's almost certain to disagree with one sooner or later. So again, this gets back to the issue that so many natural products are in fact poisons. Whether they're isolated natural products or whether they're extracts of plant materials, they're going to be poisons. Which means that in order to make that difference between a poisonous, a toxic effect, versus a therapeutic effect, requires some establishment. It requires some evidence. Maybe it requires some processing. Those of you who maybe are familiar with the processing of traditional medicines will realize that over hundreds and maybe thousands of years of experience, that sometimes processing of a traditional medicine in a certain way takes out the toxic materials, and then what is left is what's used effectively. Okay? So that's become a traditional practice, and it has to be adhered to if you're going to maintain that safety aspect for a traditional medicine. We've talked a little bit about the sustainability aspect in terms of materials and where they are. Right? One of the ironies is that we've spent a lot of money looking at galaxies. The Hubble telescope is a miraculous technological achievement to be able to get out there and take photos of distant galaxies and so on and so forth. And this is one of their amazing pictures. On the other hand, we don't know where the medicinal plants are that we need for our healthcare system. So in terms of a sustainability issue, you have no idea in this country where your medicinal plants are. And nobody does, really. One of the ways that you can get some idea of how they used to be located is to go to a place like MBOT, Missouri Botanical Garden website, and there you can plot where they collected plants from. So, for example, Gloriosa subodum, which is a source of colchicine. It's used for gout and now used for Mediterranean familial fever. Right? You know that at one point in time it was collected in those areas. So you can, and now you can do it actually more with more herbarium collections than just NBOTs, because there's now a network. So you can do it for Kew, you can do it for some of the herbarium of Harvard, the Great Herbarium, you go to the Field Museum, etc., etc. So you can plot where plants used to be. Now, those locations may be gone. They may be a parking lot now. They may be a high-rise, all right, whatever. But at least you have some idea of where they used to be. But in terms of a sustainable healthcare system, of course, that's not appropriate, because you don't know where the plants are that you are continuously going to need to maintain a traditional medicine system. Where are they? Who knows that? The answer is nobody, because nobody's doing that kind of research typically. So the reason why there's this very strange question at the end here, having a voice, what does that mean? What it means is that many, many years ago, there was a whole bunch of astronomers who got together and said, you know, one of the things that we should do is we should look at what's going on in all these galaxies and see how many galaxies we could find. So they got together and they made a proposal and they got it funded. And that's how the Hubble telescope got going. And of course now it's become a global vision of the universe. You know, you can go on the website and you can see these amazing pictures. You know, and they're gorgeous, they're beautiful, it's incredible what you can see there. The botanists and the natural product chemists have now gotten together and said, we need to know from a healthcare perspective where the medicinal plants are in the world. Because 64% of the people in the world are using medicinal plants on a daily basis. The stuff on the left here is beautiful. We're not going there. We're not going there. We're going to the pharmacy to go get a plant, a traditional medicine. We're going to the market. It's madness. It's madness, absolutely. So some questions for traditional medicine. How can the ethnomedical information and biological resources be concerned? And notice there's a new aspect in here that we haven't really touched upon yet. Ethnomedical information. We've talked about the plants. We haven't talked about the people who have the knowledge. Because the people who have the knowledge are dying. And that information that they have is not necessarily being recorded or being passed on. And if that doesn't happen, it's lost, it's gone. Now, of course, there are some systems of medicine, traditional medicine, like in China, in India, some other parts of the world, where it's written down, where much of that knowledge is written down and has been written down for many, many years. But there are also many places, even in the Chinese system, various aspects of the Chinese, because it's not all one system, that have not been written down, that are still passed from practitioner to apprentice. But if the apprentice is not there, because they're working in some computer company in the city, that knowledge dies with the person. So an important aspect of here is recording information. So for example, if we look at traditional medicine in the Philippines, how well is that recorded? Because that's your future healthcare system. Right? That's where you begin to explore. That's where you begin to say, well, what's important in the healthcare system here? And how's it been recorded? Because that's where the development is going to be needed. And how sustainable is it? We've talked about this a lot, so I'm going to dwell on that. the basic issue, though, what's the contemporary science behind the essential oils and the traditional medicines, being provided to the patient? Because it has to be based in science. That's why we're all here. All right? We're all here looking at this, the science. But also, what we need to look at is we've got some important implications here. We've got an expanding population. An expanding population means a higher demand, even within a country, without looking at globalization. That means increased demand. What are the implications for climate change here? What are the implications for growing medicinal plants based on the impact of climate change? How does that affect the amount of rainfall, the level of drought, the sunlight, etc., etc.? Because as soon as you change any one of those factors, you've changed the chemistry. Right? And if you, again, you change the chemistry, you change the biology, you change the effect on the patient. So I'll give you an example of climate change. And you can go to the CNN website and take a look at this. So these two pictures here, these were taken from the CNN office in Beijing on 2 weeks apart. This one was taken when there was going to be a G20 summit in Beijing. And so the government said, well, we're going to close down the factories, we're going to limit car movement around the city, we're going to limit the trucks, and so on and so forth. So the environment cleaned up. All right, there's actually a blue sky. This is how, when I first went to Beijing, this is how Beijing, not with all the tall buildings, but this is how Beijing used to be. It used to be green and clear, and you could see the Western Mountains and the Great Wall almost from Tiananmen Square. Normally, it looks like this. I was there with my daughter about 3 years ago, and literally you could barely look across the street and see the other side of the street. The smog was just horrendous. It was the way London used to be back in the olden days. It was much worse than this, actually, when I was there. So this is what we're doing. This is what's happening to you here now. You might not be able to see it, but anyone who's flown over Manila and many, many other cities in the world, you see the stagnant air. You see the level of pollution that we're all breathing all the time. And of course, we've got this whole melting ice, the rising sea levels. So what's the impact of climate change on production and sourcing of essential oils and medicinal plants? You've got 7,107 islands in the Philippines, okay, roughly, I think it is. And what's the number of those that are inhabited? 2,200, something like that. Anyway, quite a large number. 30 years from now, how many of those are going to be viable as population size because of increasing sea levels? And how is that being studied, both in the academic environment but also in the corporate environment? And how is the government sponsoring those studies? Some more questions for traditional medicine. What's the role of safe and effective traditional medicines within an integrated healthcare system? What happens is that for a lot of people who are taking various medicines, and pharmacy people, especially clinical pharmacists, will tell you this, that they take a drug, right? It might be an OTC drug or it might be a prescription drug. But probably they're also going to be taking some kind of dietary supplement, some healthcare supplement as well. As soon as you get into that, you're into what's called polypharmacy. And polypharmacy begins to look at the issue of the interactions between a traditional medicine or a dietary supplement and a prescription product or an OTC product. Is there a change in the effectiveness? Because remember, there is no silver bullet in pharmacy. There is no drug that's a silver bullet. Okay, that's a myth. Myth number one. Blow that away. We'll see why that is just a little later. this is very important too. What are the communications and education that are needed for practitioners, patients, and educators about this new area of traditional medicine? Right? Because there's got to be a new level of awareness about this stuff, about the changes that are going on and the changes that need to go on. We'll mention a little bit more about this. What's the agenda for the next 15 to 20 years for accessible, quality, safe, and consistent and sustainable traditional medicinal products? Traditional medicine, has it changed in 4,000 years? This is serious. This is serious. Okay, so the picture on the left comes from a series of paintings that were made for a particular pharmaceutical company in the early 1950s that are the history of pharmacy. And you can look those up on the website. There's a website on the paintings of the history of pharmacy. And a lot of colleges of pharmacy in the United States actually have these pictures up in a room or in a corridor or something like this. So one of the pictures is of a painting depicting a TCM practitioner from 2000 BC. So that practitioner there, they've got some rhubarb, they've got some ginseng here. They've got some. This looks like ephedra, something like that. And here's our practitioner. So I was down in Medellin, Colombia. I've got a former student down there. She's working in the university. She's a professor at the university there, works on traditional medicines. And so I was with another friend, a dentist friend, and we were looking, because we're very interested in traditional medicines that are used in oral medicine, like for toothache, for ulcers and this kind of stuff. It's very poorly stuff. Anyway, so I said to her, can we go downtown and go to a botanica, and go to someone who's selling medicinal plants, and let's see what they have, So we came across this person and talked to him for a while, and I took a photo. It's one of a number of photos I took of that area where he was selling plants. So this is in the middle of Medellin. Medellin used to be the drug capital of the world, literally. You can go back and Google that one, or Wikipedia, whatever. And I took this photo, and it wasn't until much later that I realized the relationship between that photo and that painting. And I'm thinking to myself, this is from 2000 BC, this was 2006. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. This is not a patient expectation. Right? We haven't changed in 4,000 years. We're still practicing traditional medicine in the same way. Come on, this is the 21st century. Where's the science here? Where's the healthcare system? So this is, as I've showed you before, this is a little bit how contemporary traditional medicine looks. This is from Kerman in Iran, Marrakesh, Morocco, Valparaiso in Chile. This was in Indonesia. I'll tell you a story about that in a moment. And this is in Lijiang. Lijiang is in Yunnan province in China. So they're just sitting out on the side of the street. Okay, so I need to watch the time here, just a little bit. Okay, so I was in Yogyakarta, and I went with a friend. I said, let's go to a traditional medicine shop. And so this wasn't a traditional medicine shop, this was a pharmacy. What's the term of pharmacy for that? And so the pharmacist there said, one of the problems here is we have malaria. Okay, so he said to me, are you taking anything for malaria? And I said, no, I don't usually do that. Unless I'm out in the field somewhere. So he said, well, no, we've got some problems in the city. So he said, I think you should try this preparation that we have for malaria. So that was this material right here. right? A mix of whatever, something. And again, what we were talking about earlier, he just gave me, a little amount like this and said, drink that and, it'll help you for a couple of days as a preventive. So, okay, so again, it's disgusting. really disgusting. So I needed my M&Ms after that. Get something sweet in my mouth. But anyway, but the point being, this is, again, right in the middle of the city. Yeah? This is really important. This is really important, okay? To make advancement in traditional medicine a reality, we need to deal with some myths. Right? And there's a number of plants that are mythical plants. Right? But that's only part of the story. Myths and legends generally are a global phenomenon. It's not restricted to one particular community, one particular culture. It's global. So if you look at all these countries here, we've got China, we've got Japan, we've got North American Indian, from all over the world. Right? And I'm sure you've got some here. I don't think I pulled one from the Philippines. But you've got them from Northern Europe, from Mexico, blah, blah, blah. It's a fundamental aspect, it seems, of human nature to have created these myths. And one of the functions, whether they're true or not, is that they're handed down from generation to generation, they're recorded, and they become a support system for the society. They become the stories that you tell your children, right? And they keep going on. And of course, some of them are myths/legends that people still hunt, right? Like Loch Ness monsters and Yetis and Bigfoot out in the western part of the United States, right? And maybe someone's still looking for mermaids. I don't know. And then we've also got some mythical plants. Opium was one of those mythical plants, of course, was translated into various things. Cinchona was a mythical plant in terms of being a treatment for malaria in certain parts of the world. Mandrake is another mythical plant as a panacea. And one of the reasons for that is because the roots have this human-like form. So the panacea is the notion that it's a cure-all. And ginseng, of course, is another one that has that reputation, again, because of the form of the roots. Ergot, we're going to talk about ergot in a completely other context. Okay, now we're going to get into some serious myth busting. So, again, since I'm from Chicago, I have to use my two favorite guys from Chicago, or two of them, Dan Aykroyd and whatever. So we're going to do some myth busting here. Now, this is audience participation time, just to make you aware. So this is a quiz, an on-the-spot, on-the-fly quiz. This traditional medicine has been used for thousands of years, therefore it's safe and effective. True or false? False. False. Right. Do you know, I asked that question a few years ago when I showed these slides when I first put these together in China, and the response was true. The response from the audience was true. Now this is serious. This is serious. This is from a group of graduate students, right, who are in traditional medicine. So you think about that. Think about the implications of that. All right, let's deal with the next one. You got that one right. Okay. Why? Why? Anybody know why? Everybody jumped to the right response of yes, but why? Please be clear. Sorry? No scientific evidence. That's right. That's right. Using the right plant is adequate. Yes or no? Ah, not quite so clear on that response. Yes or no? Do we have to? No. Okay. Why? Someone be very clear on the statement. Who wants to say? Sorry?
The factor of location can change the temperature.
Location, that's one aspect, but that's not the real aspect. Using the right plant. Is that okay? What are you saying? Christine? No?
That part.
How much?
Let's deal with this one. And the two will fit together. The constituents are always the same, irrespective of the origin, plant part, or mode of preparation. Is that true? False. Good. Now we're getting something. Older plant material is less effective or more toxic. Why? No science. It can be true or false. It can be true or false. And I've seen papers where both have been true. So in other words, sometimes as the plant gets older and oxidation takes place to certain of the compounds, that's generating the active principles. Whereas in other cases you need fresh plant material because otherwise the activity is lost. So you have to base that in science. It's not a straightforward yes or no. Medicinal plants are safer than synthetic drugs.
False.
You don't know. You don't know because you're not comparing. It depends on what you're comparing. But my point about this is that there's a lot of stuff that's out there, whether it's in the medical community or whether it's in other parts of the pharmacy community or out in the lay public, that has these preconceptions about traditional medicines. All right. There's a story behind some of these, actually. I started with about 3 myths, and then over a period of about 4 or 5 years, I kept adding to them. So it goes on. All right. Here's another one. What about this one? Wild collected, because this is a common myth. A lot of people have this one. But particularly, I have to say, in the Chinese community. Is that true? Would you say, Christine? Yeah. Wild collected plants are more active than cultivated plants. We don't know. It could be either. Science. And again, it goes back to location. Where are you going to grow that wild plant? Where does it come? Where's it originated? Does it make a difference if it's grown on a mountainside or if it's grown in a wet bog? Complex mixtures of plants cannot be standardized. This is a common argument for that some scientists will say to you, well, you can't deal with medicinal plants because they can't be standardized. You can't look at the compounds in them. So we're going to take a look at that in a moment. This is completely false. This product is well regulated. Now this is a common myth with respect to patients who go into a pharmacy and behind some desk you've got the prescription products. And then out in front of that you've got your OTC products, and right next to them are the herbal products, dietary supplements. And a lot of people will go in there and they will, certainly in the United States, I don't know about here, but certainly in the United States, they will think that because the OTC products are regulated, that the products over here that are the dietary supplements are also regulated. And that somehow they're being protected. Somehow that name, back to the name again, that name that's on the box actually has meaning from a regulatory point of view with respect to what's in the box. Wrong. False. The plant will always be there. Yeah. It took me many years actually to come up with this one. And then it suddenly clicked that that's a myth. It's a myth. Another one. The same thing applies. Traditional knowledge will always be there. Only if it's written down. Only if it's in binary form. It's in some database somewhere. Right? How about this one? This is another myth. This is the myth in modern medicine, all right, about traditional medicine. What do you think that myth is? It's a very self-serving myth, typically, particularly with the American Medical Association, maybe with your medical association too. What do you think that myth is? Traditional medicines are not effective and therefore are not worth considering as part of a contemporary healthcare system. No respect. There's no respect. Right? So they're not interested in that relationship of what constitutes a drug and what constitutes something that might be effective for a patient. In order to think about the future, all right, you have to come back to this fundamental question. All right, so I just want to check the time again. Okay, so many years ago, I was with my daughter and my wife, and we were in Korea. The reason we were there, we were visiting some friends there, but also my daughter is Korean, just out of interest for you. So I was giving a lecture, and my daughter and my wife were sitting at the back of the lecture room, and I set up my daughter, all right, and I said, I want you to say this one word when I show this slide, and I want you to say this one word. I said, because probably nobody in the audience is going to get the answer right, so you can put your hand up, and I'll ask you at the back. and you can, she was like 13 years old at the time, so and everybody knew her, everybody in the audience knew her because they know that I have this Korean daughter. Right? So she said, "Okay, Dad, I'll do that." Okay. So what's the answer to the question? Collaboration, that's right. Okay. So at the time, nobody else in the audience knew this, all right? And then they're saying, oh, well, you need high technology, you need good HPLC, you need good training, you need, good labs, blah blah blah, good education, So this little girl at the back of the room sticks her hand up and says, collaboration! You're right! Everybody laughed. But they all knew that they'd been set up, so yes, you're right, of course. And I said this the other day, I said this yesterday. It's only idiots who climb mountains on their own. And doing research is climbing a mountain. And there are very, very, very few papers now that are ever published with a single author that represent research. All right, everything is collaboration. And the key, of course, is what do you need? What do you need to collaborate? And that need is both a personal need, all right, and a scientific need. Okay? It's a personal need and a scientific need. And don't ever, ever underestimate the personal aspects. Right? Because personal aspects involve ego. And if you're going to be successful as a researcher, you have to set aside your collaborative ego. Alright? Because you're part of a team. And I've led some teams. I've led some very, very prestigious teams with very high-level people with enormous egos. But that's a challenge. I want to tell you, that's a challenge. For example, two of our team members were the people who discovered Taxol. Right? Sitting around the table together, working on research. So Taxol is what? $1.5 billion a year drug now? Camptothecin. They also developed camptothecin. So you have to deal with those people. Right? How do you deal with them? How do you say to them, well, you know, Munro, can you do this? Can you get these results done? You know, by next week? No, because you're a team. We need the results. We've got a report to write. I've got a report to write. I'm the leader of the group. We've got a report to write. We've got to get it done. So I need those results. Thanks, Monroe. Talk to you later. And then we have a meeting. Right? Here we are, and we'll see this when we do the drug discovery thing. Here we are, you have your meeting. Everybody sits around the table and you discuss your results. So, the ego, another ego aspect here is right and wrong. Right? In the sense that you have to present your successes and your failures to the group. Right? Because you need the help of everybody. Everybody's working together. It's not just about the issue of smooth science. Right? It's about the issue of solving problems. And that's a team effort. And then, of course, eventually you have some success, so you party to it. There's a Vietnamese monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. You may have heard of him. He's written many books now on Zen philosophy. So, thank you, Thich Nhat Hanh, for this story. Not the pictures, but for the story. So, there's a peasant working in the field. Whoops. Sorry. And the peasant sees the king riding by at high speed on his horse. And he cries out, and I can't do a peasant accent very well. And he cries out, "Your Majesty, where are you going at such a pace?" Where are you going at such a pace? I can do a king accent. To which the king replies, "I don't know. Ask the horse." Ask the horse. Who are we in this picture? No, we're not. We're the king. We're the king. Who's the horse? What's the horse? Are we the scientists the king? Are the evolving technologists in natural product research the horse? Do we know where the horse is taking us? In other words, are we really in charge of all the data that we process? And is what we're doing, is our use of the technology for the benefit of society, for the benefit of the patient? So in terms of do we know where the horse is taking us? I've come across papers where people have done database analyses of GC mass specs. Okay? So they use the NIST database of mass spectral data. And they say, well, this material that came off at this point in this gas chromatogram and with this mass corresponds to this compound. And it's from an essential oil. Except that the structure that they put down that corresponds to that mass could never be a natural product. So who's in charge? One of the things we've got to be really careful about as we get more and more into artificial intelligence and the use of databases with respect to the interpretation of the data, all right? We need to make sure that it's rational, that it does have meaning, to our science. Right? And that we're not so reliant on the database, so reliant on the system that can churn out a response and say, well, this mass corresponds to this structure, that it turns out to be nonsense. So be careful that you're in charge of the horse, right? And that you know where you're going. Because it gets lots of people into trouble. So when the king is not in charge of the horse, you end up with situations like Volkswagen did. Right? Where the technology doesn't work. The technology has created defeat devices, where you have software to overcome diesel emissions control. Right? So the company gets led astray, and it costs them billions and billions and billions of dollars, and they'll probably never recover. They'll never fully recover, because it's still coming out. It's still coming out that other parts of the same company have used other different softwares. Other car companies have done the same thing. So you've got lawsuits, fines, resignations, criminal prosecutions in numerous countries. It's out of control. It was out of control for that company. The horse took over, and it completely led them astray. Completely. That estimated cost is probably higher now than $20 billion. Much higher. Let's go back to Alice in Wonderland and see if we can make some sense out of all of this. So Alice asks the Cheshire Cat, "Would you please tell me which way I ought to go from here?" asked Alice. "Well, that depends a good deal on where you want to get to." So that's one of the questions that we have to have as natural product chemists, biologists, scientists. Where is it that we want to get to? What is it that we're trying to achieve? So that goes back to that function business again. What is the function of what we're doing, and where's the form that we put together with that? And is there an appropriate pathway here? Is there a right way and is there a wrong way? No, because we don't know. We don't know. We can only guess. We can only guess that going down this direction is going to be appropriate for us. And recognizing that other people in other countries may choose a different direction. We're at a crossroads. We can follow a status quo, and there is a status quo. We can just keep going on and using the resources we have and investigating them as we have. Or we can follow a different pathway. This is a scene from a movie. Stowaway movie. But it's about the path less trodden. For me, it's about the path less trodden. Some of you may know this person. Woody Allen, comedian, filmmaker, director. He's got some other reputations as well. Anyway, he's not known as a great philosopher, but he made a very interesting comment a few years ago, which was this: more than at any time in history, mankind faces the crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness, the other to total extinction. I pray we have the wisdom to choose wisely. The Woodman, Woody Allen. So yes, we are at a crossroads. We're at a critical juncture here, whether it's with respect to natural products generally, or traditional medicines, or whatever. A very famous American poet wrote a poem that relates to this. I'm not going to go through the poem in detail. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveller. Long I stood and looked down for as long as I could to where it bent into the undergrowth. Then took the other, just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with sighs somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less travelled. So in other words, it is taking that alternative vision. It's not taking the road of the status quo. It's taking the chance. It's taking the risk. It's being creative, it's being innovative, it's being out there and saying, well, maybe we should be doing things differently. Maybe we should be doing things differently. Let's go to another religion. This is a different aspect of Buddhism. This is one of my favorite Buddhist writers, Ajahn Chah, now deceased, who wrote in a book, A Still Forest Called. He's a Thai, from the Thai aspect of India. He used to have a monastery, a forest monastery in Ubamachitani province, close to the Mekong. He says that if you're on the 5th step and you think you are too high, you will never make it to the 6th step. What does that mean? It's about quality control. It's about the quality of what we do, and how we do it, and how we improve. In other words, if you're so self-satisfied, if you think that what you're doing now is the best you can do, think again. Think about trying to do something a little bit better. And then applying that to your research, applying that to your thinking, applying that to your writing. It was translated in a very different way by an American. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So let's get back to traditional medicine and look at how people have tried to improve traditional medicine. There was a meeting in Beijing some time ago, from which came the so-called Beijing Declaration. This was the WHO Congress. So it talked about respect, preserve, and promote the knowledge and practices of traditional medicine, formulate national policies, regulations, and standards, and ensure appropriate, safe, and effective use of traditional medicines. This is a declaration urging countries to promote traditional medicine research and innovation and enhance communication. So it has all these fundamental aspects of how to improve traditional medicine. A few years ago, I was here in Manila, and I was working at an office just down the road from here on United Nations Avenue, where WHO regional office for the world, the Western Pacific regional office of WHO is just down there. And 3 of us put together this document. It's the WHO Regional Strategy for Traditional Medicine for this period of time. And it was based on this fundamental philosophy that patients should be assured of continued availability of quality, safe, and effective traditional medicine products, and the notion of sustainability. So this document was actually written a few miles from here, mostly. It was approved by all 27 countries in the region, by the Ministries of Health of all 27 countries. So those countries in the WPRO go from Mongolia in the north, Malaysia in the west, Korea in the east, and Australia and New Zealand in the south, and include all of the Pacific Islands and so on and so forth. It's a huge area of the world. And WPRO in Manila here has been the leading traditional medicine kind of promoter, as it were, of improvement in traditional medicine in the world. And of course, partly that's driven by China, because China's included in this as well. So just to give you an idea of some of the aspects that are included in this document, part of it relates to policies. And we'll mention this a little bit later on. Part of it relates to policies, regulatory criteria, and technical guidelines for safe and effective GMs. In other words, you've got to have a collaboration that operates between the scientists, the regulators, and the manufacturers in order to have a system that looks at what it is the patient receives. Okay? You can't just have the scientists involved. You can't just have government involved. You can't have government suddenly saying, well, we need safe and effective traditional medicines 2 years from now. Well, that's not going to work. You need to put together a rational proposal, a rational plan, a rational system that's going to come up with that. So that's what this is about. And also, that deals with contaminants and adulterants. That you harmonize regulations. I mentioned this before. In other words, if you've got 27 countries in this region, what can you do to begin to harmonize the regulations for traditional medicines in the region? Where does ASEAN stand, for example, on that issue? Terminology. Terminology is a big, big issue. We haven't even mentioned that. Okay? In other words, terminology is when you have the same plant, right, with a different local name in different countries. Or when you have different plants with the same name in the same country. And what you get is confusion. And that doesn't help the patient. And develop international standards. So there's a big program actually going on now that's directed by a group in Tokyo on terminology, to try to bring together all the names that of traditional medicines that are being used and to standardize them with a botanical name. Okay? Because that's the common factor. The local name can't be the common factor. The internationally recognized standard name for that plant is the common factor. Some more aspects. Develop a resource inventory. In other words, what plants are where and the conservation programs to assure the sustainability of natural health materials. Right? So that's in that document. Develop globally accessible databases. The information systems on traditional medicines. How they're used, where they're used. Because obviously there's significant overlap. The same plant may be used in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, or in Thailand for the same purpose. Right? Can you bring that information together? Can you rationalize it? What does that mean in terms of the research that needs to be done? What's the research that's already been done? How do you bring that all to a level of effectiveness? And then that gets into the issue of integrated healthcare. Right? Because, as we know, rationally, that's what people are practicing. They're practicing polypharmacy. And this point here, whoops, sorry. Oops. So, internal accessibility is focused on material sources and infrastructure. In other words, it depends on what your manufacturers are producing and what plants they have access to as to what products appear on the market. Right? That's another way of saying that. All countries blend their allopathic and traditional medicine systems in various forms. In some cases it may be very formal. So, for example, I was working in Myanmar a few years ago. And one of the things that amazed me there was that at the level of the Ministry of Health, there's a Director General for allopathic medicine, and there's a Director General for traditional medicine, and they are equal in status. There are very few countries in the world which have that set up that way. Very few. They recognize that people are practicing integrated healthcare. Accessibility. Notice this last one here, from the drug point of view. Keep doing that. Accessibility includes insurance coverage. We sometimes forget about that. In other words, if a medicine is not covered by insurance and is very expensive, people are not going to buy it. Even though it could be helping them. It becomes a critical economic issue for them. So, we're going to finish up with a couple of strange slides here. You've already seen them, unfortunately. So, one of the aspects that's important here is improving the relationships between Western medicine and traditional medicine. And because I was on in a pharmacy school for many years, 35 years, and right across the street was the College of Medicine. And the College of Medicine is always the elephant on campus. It is, I'm sorry, but it is. The College of Medicine dean is always the most powerful dean and kind of just stomps on everything around, especially if it's pharmacy or dentistry or nursing or, you know, some other healthcare science, whatever. And of course I represent the traditional medicine by the tiger. So one of the things that has to happen here is mutual respect. You have to see some respect between those two systems, which are operating at the moment in very different scientific worlds. And I was at a meeting in Malaysia a few years ago, 2 years ago, when we were dealing with traditional medicines that we use for cancer versus Taxol and you know, the traditional compounds that were being used by the clinical oncologists. And I'm sitting there in the middle trying to bridge these two people together, which was interesting. And I showed this slide at that time, and I showed the next slide of how it can be done. And of course, this is a complete dream. This is never going to happen. However, one of the things that can happen is that you can move closer to that. That you can begin to see a different level of respect by the people involved. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop there for the day. I think we've done enough for the day. We'll pick up here tomorrow. But before we break, let me just check the time. Yeah, that's good. Before we break, we've covered an incredible amount of material today. Anybody have any questions? No questions? Everything's crystal clear? Okay, quiz, first thing tomorrow morning. No, I'm just kidding. No, seriously, like I said right at the beginning, when you have questions, please ask your questions. Yes, good. I'm sorry? Marijuana, what do you want to know?
And in physical
You need to answer a question first. What's marijuana? You need to ask, go back to form and function. What's the function you're asking? Hang on a minute, this is important. Go back and ask your question. Ask your question. Ladies, can we have a little quiet, please? Ask, young man, what's your name?
Jason.
Okay. Ask your question again. The question is, what? Legalizing marijuana. Right? And my response is twofold. What's marijuana? Okay. And what's the function? Go back to form and function. What's the function that you're asking about? Right? Is it recreational? No, this is serious because it's a regulatory, it's a legal issue. What's the function that you're asking about? Is it recreational use of marijuana or is it medical use of marijuana? Right? So then you get to the question of what's marijuana? Because there's a difference. We've got two different strains of marijuana. One with a high CBD content and one with a low CBD content. One is it for medical use and one is for recreational use. So then you get into the issue of what's the form that you would introduce that marijuana in. So in other words, what's the science behind the regulation of introducing a medical form of marijuana? It's not about marijuana. Okay? That's a popular myth out there. Because of the negative aspects that are associated with it. You're a scientist. Deal with that question scientifically. Okay? Deal with it scientifically. Because it's as soon as you start to do that, it's a different perspective. It's the perspective of What's the purpose? What's the function? What do you want to use it for? Now, other countries, other systems, are going to have very different view on what constitutes a use of marijuana or a sanction, if you will, of marijuana in their society. Some will say, yeah, fine to use it recreationally. No problem at all. Probably less dangerous than alcohol. Others may, for whatever reason, say no, because of their other reputation, because of other myths that are associated with it. No regulation. Others may say, no, whatever you say about marijuana is not going to be appropriate for this society. So we're going to exclude it completely. Right? Put it in science. Look at the literature. What does the literature say about the use of medical marijuana in a standardized form with respect to pain in cancer therapy? Does that have value? So it's not a yes or no. That's what I'm saying. Okay, other questions? No? Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy the afternoon, enjoy the evening. Thanks a lot.